Hello, guys. Just want to share about the white paper that's been published recently with regards to Australian aged care assessments regarding to SIRS. So one of those instances where a case study on a certain support worker, which notices a bruise on a resident's arm. She's not sure how it got there. She mentioned it to the supervisor and says, well, we'll have to keep an eye on it. So, no incident form, according to the paper, has been completed. No report is been made, and the resident's family is not being notified. Then, 3 weeks later, the same resident has another unexplained bruise. This time, a family member notices it and they complain to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. That prompted an audit. Investigators arrive, and suddenly it is not the bruise that they're looking at, it's basically the culture of the organization, the documentation, the reporting history. They also look at the incident management system. And because nothing was reported the first time, the provider now facing a compliance investigation on, I think that was on two failures. One is the incident itself, and the second failure is the failure to report it. Now, SIRS is what we call Serious Incident Response Scheme. So is one of the most important and most misunderstood obligation in Australian aged care today. And the mistake that providers, managers, and aged care workers make around SIRS are not always about caring. They're often about not knowing. So, not understanding exactly what triggers a report, when it has to be submitted, and what happened if it isn't. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what SIRS is and what it requires of you, the most common mistake that put providers and workers at real legal and regulatory risk, and how to get it right. Because in Australian aged care right now, SIRS compliance is not optional, and the consequences of getting it wrong is or getting it wrong is significant. So to understand SIRS, why SIRS matters, you need to sort of understand what it was built in response to. So way back in October 2018, the Australian government launched a royal commission into aged care. That was big. So over 2.5 years, the commission heard thousands of testimonies from residents, families, workers, and experts. What we found is quite confronting. So the interim report in 2019 was titled simply Neglect. So the commission found that the Australian aged care system was besieged by neglect. It's words, not mine. So commissioners found the existing compulsory reporting scheme had a limited scope, and that information from providers was not being used effectively. So, in plain terms, actually, serious incidents were happening, many were not reported, and when they were reported, nothing was being done with the information. So the Royal Commission's final report, way back on March 2021, contained 148 recommendations. One of the central pillars was a completely overhauled incident reporting framework. So that's where SIRS was born. SIRS was born from that. It launched on the 1st of April 2021 for residential aged care and has been progressively expanded and strengthened ever since. So, under the Aged Care Act of 2024 and the Aged Care Rules 2025, which commenced on the 1st of November 2025, SIRS now applies to all registered aged care providers, including support and home providers. Mhm. This is significant expansion. It's no longer just a residential care obligation. So SIRS exists because the Royal Commission found that older Australians were being harmed and the system was failing. The system was failing to see it, name it or stop it. So understanding that history is not just background, it is why the obligations are serious, why the penalties are real, and why compliance first attitude to SIRS completely misses the point. So SIRS is not just a tick box, exercise. It is a mechanism designed to protect some of the most vulnerable people in our community. And when it works, it saves lives and dignity. But when it fails, people are harmed in silence. Let's be precise. SIRS has three core obligations for every registered provider. So the obligation one is about the incident management system. So every provider must have an effective incident management system. We call it IMS. This is not a folder on a drawer, or it's not just a software product. It is a living set of policies, protocols, training, and culture that enables your team to identify, to respond to, and learn from incidents. So the commission will assess your IMS during audits. They look at not just whether the system exists on paper or whether your staff know how to use it, whether it's being used consistently, on whether the data from it is informing genuine improvement. So the IMS that no one on the floor knows about is not an IMS. It's a liability. The second obligation is the compulsory reporting of reportable incidents. So under Aged Care Act 2024, there are nine categories of reportable incidents. The first one is unreasonable use of force, any physical contact that is inappropriate, unnecessary. Two is unlawful sexual contact or inappropriate sexual conduct. Three is psychological or emotional abuse. This includes yelling, threatening, humiliating, or deliberate social isolation. Four is unexpected death, a death that is not consistent with the resident's known clinical condition or care plan. Five is stealing or financial coercion. Six is neglect. Seven is inappropriate use of restrictive practice. Eight is unexplained absence from care. So when a person goes missing and there are grounds to involve police, this is a reportable incident. And nine is other serious incidents that cause or could reasonably have caused harm. So critically, the obligation to report triggered by suspicion and allegation, not only confirmed incident. So you do not need proof. You do not need to have finished your investigation. If you suspect it happened, it must be reported. The third obligation is priority classification and report timeframes. So this is where the mistake compound. Every reportable incident must be classified as either priority one or priority two. The classification determines the reporting deadline. So priority one incidents are those where the incidents that has caused or could reasonably have caused physical or psychological injury or discomfort requiring medical or psychological treatment. So, like, for example, unlawful sexual contact or unexpected death and, let's say, unexplained absence are always priority one. If police needs to be notified, it is always priority one. Priority one must be reported to decommission within 24 hours of the provider becoming aware of the incident. Priority two must be reported within 30 days. So final report for all incident must be submitted within 60 days of the initial notification. So there is one additional role that providers routinely get wrong. The 24 hours starts from when any staff member becomes aware, not when management becomes aware. So what does it mean? Not when the incident form is completed, not when morning shift takes over. So the moment the worker becomes aware of the reportable priority one incident, the clock is running. So if you are unsure whether the incident is priority one or priority two, the commission published guidance is clear. Treat it as priority one and report within 24 hours. It is always safer to over-report than to under-report. So these are the 5 most significant SIRS reporting mistake made in sort of like Australian aged care, and every single one creates real, should I say, regulatory, legal, and personal professional risk. Mistake number 1: waiting for certainty before reporting. This is the most common mistake in the sector. For example, a worker observes something concerning. A supervisor is unsure, and an investigation is begun. And the report is not made until the investigation is complete or the incident is confirmed. Now, this is a direct breach of SIRS. The law is unambiguous. If you suspect a reportable incident has occurred, you need to report it. Not when you are certain or when you suspect. The Australian or the Aged Care Quality Commission receives approximately 60,000 SIRS notification per year. The commission understands that many will be allegations that are later determined to be sort of unsubstantiated. So what not acceptable is deciding not to report it because you're not certain. Think about what that sort of waiting period means in practice. A resident may still be in danger. The person who caused harm may still be working. A pattern may be sort of like developing that the commission would identify if they had the data. So you are not the investigator. You are the reporter. So report first, investigate in parallel. Once you make the initial report, you have the investigation period to gather information and submit complete final report within 60 days. So the initial report doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be timely. Mistake number 2 is misclassifying. I can't pronounce the words now. Misclassifying priority 1 as priority 2 to avoid the 24-hour window. Now, let me be direct about this one. Some providers look at a reportable incident, no, it meets the criteria for priority 1, but classify it as priority 2 because that gives them 30 days instead of 24 hours. This is not a gray area, so it is a deliberate compliance failure. And the commission is very capable of identifying it during audits and reviews of incident records. Sorry. But beyond the disparate misclassification, there is more common version of this mistake, unethical, should I say, misclassification, because the criteria are genuinely not well understood. Let me give you the scenarios, like say, scenario number one, a resident with dementia becomes agitated during personal care and scratch a worker's arm. Is this a reportable incident? That the worker was injured, not the resident. So this falls outside SIRS scope for residents harm. But if the agitation was a response to a unreasonable handling by the worker, that changes the picture entirely. Another scenario would be, should I say, a resident refuses a shower for 3 days and develops cane breakdown. At what point does this becomes reportable neglect? You know, the commission guidance on neglect includes poor hygiene or grooming and unmet personal care needs. If the omission, should I say, within the provider's control and has caused harm, it needs reassessment for reporting. Another scenario, let's say a staff member repeatedly make dismissive comments to a resident who has English as a second language, making them feel unwanted and isolated. Is this psychological abuse? Yes. Deliberate social isolation and humiliation are explicitly named under the Aged Care Commission's guidance on psychological and emotional abuse. So classification in no is not always straightforward, but the answer is always to use the Aged Care Commission's published decision support tools available on their website. So, and when genuinely, or if you're genuinely in doubt, go priority one. So, mistake number three is not understanding that the clock starts at the worker. What does it mean? So, here is where providers get caught repeatedly. A morning shift, like for example, worker notices something unusual about the resident at 7 a.m. She mentioned it to the colleague. She documented it in the progress note. She tells the nurse who comes on at 2 p.m. The nurse reviews the note, decided this may be a SIRS reportable incident, and tells the facility manager at 4 p.m. The manager reviews at 9 a.m. on the following morning and submit it as a report. Now, that report is approximately 26 hours late because the 24-hour clock started at 7 a.m. when the support worker first became aware. Not 4 p.m., not at 9 a.m. On the next day. 7 a.m. moment she noticed, right? So this basically has an enormous implication for how you sort of escalate. So how you do the escalation has a significant impact on this. So it is not enough to have SIRS reporting process that starts with the manager. Your process must start with the worker, and the worker must know that if they identify what could be a reportable incident, their primary obligation is to escalate it immediately to the responsible person who can initiate notification process. Like for example, the after hours and weekend escalation pathway are not operational, so they are They are mandatory. The commission expects providers to have processes or priority one reporting outside business hours. If your, should I say, SIRS process only works Mondays to Friday, 9 to 5, it does not meet the standard. The solution is investment in training. That's one. Every member of your workforce, every support worker, every personal care worker, every volunteer needs to understand three things: what a potentially reportable incident looks like, that they must escalate immediately, and who they escalate to at any hour of the day or at night. Mistake number 4 is treating SIRS reporting as compliance tasks instead of a care response. This is a cultural failure, and it is a widespread in organization where SIRS is treated purely as, should I say, regulatory box ticking exercise. Reporting becomes something that happens to protected provider. The incident form is completed, the notification is submitted, a file note is made, and the resident sits in the room, frightened, confused, unheard. Now, SIRS is built on 3 core principles: respond to the person, report to the commission, and improve the system. The reporting is the middle step. The person comes first. When something reportable happens, your first obligation is not the commission's portal. Okay, it is ensuring the immediate safety and the well-being of the person affected. That means removing ongoing risk, ensuring medical or psychological support is accessed if needed, notifying the person's family or, should I say, representative that is required under the open disclosure obligations, ensuring the person feels supported, not invincible. Now, open disclosure is a legal obligation that runs along SIRS. So providers must facilitate and do open disclosure discussion with the person and their representatives when someone goes wrong. This conversation is not an admission of liability, though. It is a human obligation and a legal one. The organizations that consistently perform well under commission scrutiny are not the ones with the cleanest notification records. They are the ones who can demonstrate that when incidents occur, the person was the center of every decision that followed. A notification to the commission that describes a thorough, person-centered response is fundamentally different to one that describes a procedure process. So auditors are trained actually to see the difference. Another one is the 5th mistake number 5. So under reporting because of fear, from workers and from managers, the Royal Commission found something important about why the old reporting system failed. It was not primarily because people didn't know about it. It was because the culture of aged care was one in which raising concerns felt dangerous. Workers feared reprisal. They feared being seen as troublemakers. They feared losing their job, and sometimes they feared being right. Under SIRS and Aged Care Act 2024, protections to people who raise concerns have been significantly strengthened. Whistleblowers protection now cover aged care workers, residents, family members, volunteers, and others who actually make disclosure in good faith. Providers are prohibited from taking adverse action against a person for making a protective disclosure. So, but a legal protection is only effective if people know about and believe it will be upheld, because this is a leadership obligation. If you are in any kind of management or leadership role in aged care, your staff are watching how you respond when incidents are reported. Do you thank them for raising it? Do you actually investigate with curiosity or with suspicion? Do you make it clear that a report is never a punishment, or it is the system working exactly as intended? There is also a version, or there is also, should I say, a version of underreporting that happens at management level. An incident occurs, management is informed, and a judgment is made that this one's probably not need to go to the commission. Sometimes that judgment is correct. Many incidents are significant, but do not met the reportable threshold. But when that judgment is driven by a desire to protect the facility's incident record, or to avoid scrutiny, or to terminate the so-called appearance of problems during an audit period, that is a serious governance failure. The Commission analyzes reporting patterns across providers. So a provider with unusually low incident rates compared to a similar services, raises a flag. Underreporting is not invincible. It shows in the data, and it will be investigated. So a low SIRS notification count is not a sign of a safe organization. It may be a sign of a silent one. So let me be direct about what is at stake. If an aged care provider fails to meet its SIRS obligation, the Commission has a range of escalating responses. So these responses range from lower end, where, let's say, at the lower end, it involves targeted contacts, requests for further information. It also involves performance monitoring and, should I say, requirement to develop an improvement plans. So another tier of that is the more serious one, which requires for the Commission to ask for, to provide compliance notices, condition registration, restrictions on accepting new residents or clients. And the most serious one involves banning orders against K personnel, significant civil penalties, and I think revocation of providers' registration. So under the current legislative framework, civil penalties for body corporate in breach of SIRS obligation can reach up to 1.65 million. But the financial penalty is not the only risk. For individual workers and managers, failure to report reportable incident, particularly where harm results, can constitute to breach of duty of care. In serious cases involving criminal conduct, there is an additional obligation to notify police. So failing to do so creates separate and compounding legal exposure. There is also a consequences for, should I say, registration under the Code of Conduct for Aged Care, which sets standards for all workers in the sectors. Breaches to the code, including conduct that amounts to failure to protect residents from harm, can result in banning orders, preventing an individual from basically working in aged care. So, and beyond the, should I say, regulatory and legal consequences, there is a human one. Where SIRS reporting fails, the person at the center of the incident carries the burden alone. They do not receive the acknowledgement they deserve. Pattern of harm that may be building around them goes undetected, and the system that was designed to protect them becomes another layer of silence. That is the real cause of getting SIRS wrong. So I want to close with 5 concrete things that separate organizations and individuals who get SIRS right from those who are. So the first one is know the 9. What does it mean? So know them, know the 9 SIRS, reportable SIRS, know them cold. So every person in your workplace should be able to name the 9 categories of reportable incidents to look them without having to look them up. You know, not because there'll be quizzes on them, but because when something happens in front of them at, let's say, 11 p.m. on Sunday, they need to recognize it immediately. So include SIRS refreshers training in your regular team meetings. Make the 9 categories part of your induction. Post them in staff rooms and handover areas. Normalize talking about them. The second, number 2, is build a rapport, build a reporting culture that rewards, not punishes. Your worker needs to believe that reporting is safe, not just because the law protects them, but because the culture of your organization makes it safe. Thank your staff. Every time they raise a concern or complete an incident report, frame it as exactly what it is. The system is working. Make it clear that the worker who report are the ones who are protecting residents, protecting themselves, and protecting the organization. Number 3 is design your, should I say, escalation pathway for the worst case. Do not design your incident reporting pathway for the standard weekday. Design it for a priority 1 incident at 3 a.m. on a public holiday. Who does they who does the support worker call? Who the who is the responsible person who has access to my aged care provider? This is very important. Important, who has the access to my care provider portal to submit the notifications. So how is the 24-hour deadline tracked? If you cannot answer those questions confidently right now, your escalation pathway has a gap. So close it before incident occurs, not after. Fourth is lead with the person, document with precision. When a reportable incident occurs, your first documented action should reflect the person's safety and well-being. So immediate response. Uh, Support needs to be offered. So family needs to be notified under open disclosure obligations. Medical, or psychological assessment if required, then document the facts, not interpretation, not judgment, just facts. What was observed, by whom, when, what was done, and what will happen next. A well documented incident tells the commission a story of a complete, caring provider who actually treats every incident as a serious matter. Poorly documented incident tells a different story. Now, five, use your source data to improve, not just to report. So every incident notification that leaves your organization is a data point. Are you reviewing them? Are you identifying the patterns? Are you asking certain staff members name? Are you asking the members name repeatedly? Like, are incidents concentrated to a particular time of the day, or let's say particular care areas? Are the same types of incident reoccurring? The commission expects provider to use incident data to drive continuous improvement. An organization that can basically demonstrate it, analyze its incident data, identify trends, and basically the false rate, for example, decrease. That is what governance looks like. So SIRS data is not just a compliance record. It is your most direct window into a safety of your residents and clients. Now, SIRS exists because of what the Royal Commission has found. If it found that older Australians were being harmed, that the harm was not always seen, that when it was seen, it was not always reported, and that when it was and when it was reported, it did not always lead to change. SIRS is the attempt to break that cycle. It is a legal obligation, but underneath the legislation, it is something more fundamental. It is a commitment that every person who enters an aged care service has the right to live without abuse and neglect. And that when the right is violated, the system will know, will respond, and will act. Whether you are a support worker, a registered nurse, a care manager, a compliance officer, or a provider board member, you are part of that commitment. The five mistakes we covered today are not rare. They happen every day in facilities and services across Australia, but they are also preventable with training, with culture, with clear system, and with leadership that takes both the legal obligation and the human one seriously. One practical action before your next shift, go and locate your organization's SIRS escalation pathway. You need to read it. Ask yourself, does every person on my team know this exists? And if something happens at 2 a.m. tonight, would we get the report? Would we get the report in on time? If the answer to any of that is if the answer is anything other than clear yes, that is your starting point. This is Clinical Insights with Ed. Subscribe for more content on clinical reasoning, patient safety, aged care governance, and decision-making frameworks that matter in real work healthcare. Every older person care deserves to be protected.